conversation. I'll let you both introduce yourselves and your backgrounds while I find Cheryl.
All right. Sounds good. I'll go first.
Thank
you. So Dr. Toddy, so I am currently Director of Veterinary Affairs at Royal Canin, and but I did own a practice back in 2007 to 2010, and before that was an associate veterinarian. So I was certainly there for the onset of the 1-800-PET-MEDS onslaught. So so have lived in the sunrise phase of online pharmacies.
Thanks, Dr. East. Hi, Bruce Truman. Similar to Dr. East, I've done the journey, and in the early days of my career, I was a salesperson in Central Florida and kind of in the epicenter of PET-MEDS and PET-MEDS acquiring many of the non-prescription flea and tick products and then commercializing them, through their platform. My journey has taken me from sales to marketing on brands like Frontline and Revolution, and then to helping build one of the first e-commerce platforms at VetStreet with a partnership with AmerisourceBergen MWI. There were maybe one or two others out there before that, but those were the early days of the online pharmacy. And then after that, I spent a number of years working on the what's now the Covetrus e-commerce platform, or most of us will know it as the Vet's First Choice platform. Spent a number of years working on that platform. Then my journey has taken me from there to working for both Fear Free and Whisker Docs in a Chief Commercial Officer role. So I'm really excited about this conversation. There's so much going on in the space right now with the Chewy lawsuit, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and other activities. And we just want to kick it off with Cheryl here, Dr. Good, and have a great conversation with everybody.
Yeah, so for some reason I wasn't on the session, so I was lost who knows where. But
lost
I'm here.
Cyberspace.
I'm back. So so happy that you guys can be with us tonight, talking about the state of veterinary pharmacies. And so we want to know why are we talking about this right now, and what's happening that's pushing this particular conversation forward.
I mean, I think it's fairly obvious, right? It's with the pandemic, but quite honestly, the pandemic was just a accelerator of consumer behavior that we were seeing beforehand. So, and as we said, I mean, and Bruce said it, with his background, and then with the 1-800-PET-MEDS. I mean, I battled it back in 2007, and it didn't go away, right? I mean, it only accelerated, and now consumer behavior is really driving the need to talk about this for online pharmacies.
And go ahead, Bruce.
No, what I would add to that is why we're here, and I think this is about the many conversations that also circle around telehealth, telemedicine with access to care, right? Mm-hmm. So having access to the pharmacy of the pet parent's choice is what we're here to talk about. And in this day and age, I believe it is about giving the pet parent the choice on their pharmacy, which may be a slightly contrarian view to many of the folks on the call, but that's what we're here to talk about, Dr. Good.
And I know, some practices I think are really embracing this, but then there are a lot of practices that are pushing back. And so why do you think that is for both ways?
Dr. East, what I would comment on that is if we look at benchmarking reports like Well Managed Practice Group, pharmacies still represent a significant portion of practice revenue. However, it's continued to decline. And so practices are trying to defend and keep a hold of that revenue. But by doing that and making access to choosing where to buy that product, by restricting that access, it's a very negative impression on the pet parents, right? So my position would be that we're doing wrong by not allowing choice. And by allowing choice, you actually elevate the role of the veterinarian and the veterinary practice, because you're giving choice, as opposed to, you know, on the VHMA, the daily chat boards that I monitor, so many practices, unfortunately, are making it difficult to get a prescription, right? They're forcing the pet parent to go into the practice. It must be mailed. There's a fee for that. Many states that's illegal, but I'm advocating for us stopping that, allowing choice. And because you allow choice, those pet parents are going to choose to support your local practice, even if they're paying a few dollars more. But it's this struggle that we're going through right now that I'm concerned about.
Yeah, and I've actually seen that in my practice, because, and we'll talk more about this, I think, next session, but some of my clients understand that they may save $1 or something buying it at some of these other pharmacies, but they do want to support us. So they're happy to pay a little bit more because we do give them that choice.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, Bruce. I think the writing's on the wall as far as the pharmaceutical revenue that we get through our practices. And, you know, a lot of practices aren't willing to give up that, 25% of revenue that really flows through that. And I was going to say, well, maybe they just don't, practices are embracing it because they're sick of getting faxes. But which I still think is funny that we still use faxes. But yeah, I think you're right. I think transparency is key, because if we're not transparent with our customers, there's that sense of mistrust, right? And that is where we go wrong. Is we try to keep all that revenue by narrowing it, but I think by choice and by having a process within the hospital to make it easy for your customer to get home delivery, because quite honestly, it's the convenience that they want. I mean, price kind of takes back seat to that. But we have to offer that convenience first, and then the consumer always has a choice.
Yeah. I agree. Go ahead, Bruce.
Just a comment I would have is that when we go to tables, I think it would be interesting to get everyone's perspective on the recent announcements for Chewy and how they've created a platform to ease the process on approving all those scripts. We know that there's a huge, some larger practices are dedicating one person just to receiving faxes and approving them. And so if we can reduce that friction in the practice, that's good. So I think I would love to hear from everyone on their opinions on that platform. And if there's anyone on that platform, what their experience has been. Is it better for the practice, or is it just, 30% better?
Yeah.
So with all of this, I know you mentioned the consumer and, the ease and all the different choices they have, but what else does this mean for them, for the consumer?
Well, I mean, I think naturally with competition comes price, but it also will come convenience. And that's where, for me as a veterinarian, and I'm sure a lot of people on the phone call, I think we all agree that we would do anything we can to increase client compliance, right? So I think what it means, not only for this ease for the consumer, really translates to compliance, which translates to better patient care long term. So, I kind of take it a little bit deeper and go down to the patient level and how that convenience will help to drive that.
And to build on that comment, I really enjoy attending the American Heartworm Society meetings every 3 years, because it's always in New Orleans. So that's a good thing. But,
it helps.
Yeah, it helps. The statistics are still that around less than 50% of dogs are protected from heartworm, and CAP-C's recommending 12 months. So we have this huge gap in compliance and education. And so access to care, access to pharmacy of choice can help facilitate that number increasing from, it's pretty disappointing right now. It really is.
Yeah, it's, you know, I just hear from my clients, it's just so expensive. It's just so expensive. But, you know, and we try with education to help them understand that if their animal gets heartworm disease, the cost of treating that is going to be exorbitant, you know, more than preventing it. But having access to, you know, lower cost, you know, pharmacies is just, for me, it makes me happy that my clients will be, those that can't afford it could go somewhere else and they could keep their pet on these products. And
yeah,
so that makes me happy because I'm all about, you know, protecting my patients.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And protecting your patients at whatever level they can afford, right? So if they can't afford Simparica Trio, which is a great product, if they can't afford that, let's put them on whatever they can afford because they deserve protection.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And you know, when you said cost and when we think about some of the reasons why hospitals kind of push back on pharmacies, right? And they push back a lot of times because of the cost competition and that competitive environment, that our margins aren't quite what they used to be, right? So, I mean, shoot, when I was in practice, it was pretty much just double whatever that bottle of amoxicillin costs, you double it, and that's what goes out the door, right? I mean, it made it pretty, the pricing strategy was pretty simplistic at the time. But, you know, now we can't do that anymore, right? And that's competition, right? And however, you know, instead of saying, hey, okay, bye, we're not going to do that anymore, and we're going to get rid of that revenue, you know, but that's not really the answer. But that's the perception is, right? Is like this shrinking margin. If I sell online, I have this shrinking margin, and because I have to pay, you know, I have to share that cost, right? But, you know, there's some fallacy to that thinking. When you think about compliance, especially for those heartworm prevention and food and things like that, where if you have repeat customers coming through your online pharmacy, you know, that's pure revenue for you because you never paid for that. You never paid for that product. You never wrote the check or paid that credit card bill to whoever, you know, for that product. So you have to kind of think of it more in a cash flow way, but that's the biggest thing I've heard is that margin aspect. I don't know about you, Bruce, when you've been in that space.
No, hearing the same thing, right? So the concerns are giving up margin. They'd rather sell it in the practice for a better margin, but the reality is the market's being driven by convenience and by price, right? So, you know, choose a pharmacy partner, you know, Vet Source, Vet's First Choice, Midwest Veterinary Supply, choose one of those pharmacy partners.
So I came in early because I'm going to point something out that I think is really interesting in this entire conversation. I am a consumer. I am not a veterinarian. I am not a technician. But as you guys were talking, do you know what? I all of a sudden something light bulb went off for me. My veterinarian has not asked me or come to me and said, so you're using this flea and tick and you're using this heartworm, but we have it right here. You could walk out with it right away or have it in their hands and say, here it is, because it's a different brand than they cover, but they've never asked me why I'm going with the brand I have. I've just always done it. So I am realizing, and don't get me wrong, I've got 20 years of parasiticides experience behind me, but at the same time, I've gotten lazy and I've just gotten used to this is what I do. And I am realizing that part of this online pharmacy conversation is what are you saying in your practice? How are you actually talking about? I know we're going to talk about solutions in a minute, but I had this massive, like, no one's actually come to me and said, why are you using these ongoing products when you could be helping this practice? Like, no one's ever asked me that. And so I find that to be, and I know we're going to talk more about that, but I do love, we're going to go to the tables here, everyone. And I do actually want to make sure, I love that we're already getting some comments here. It's going to give us a moment to look at some of the comments as we're going through. But I love what Bruce is also asking us. The question that is going to be going to the tables and into the chat for any of you that are on your cell phone or that are on an iPad is like, what challenges are you facing with online pharmacies? But I love what he's also challenging you is really to give your perspective on what Chewy is doing. And is this in fact creating an ease for you if you are doing it? And if you are, we'd love to get your personal experience on it. So what is your ideas on that platform? So we are going to either send you into the chat or we're going to send you to your tables. Don't go anywhere because we're going to come back and we're actually going to be talking more about some solutions as well. And then we are going to have a Q&A session at the back end. So if you've got questions that you want to bring forward. So what we're going to do now is go to the tables. And right at 6:30, we'll come back with more conversations. So use the chat if you need to, or go ahead and use your tables for conversations. We are excited to engage with you all. So we'll be right back here in a few minutes.